Hi, I'm Melissa Ushakov. I'm the product manager for the Access group at GitLab, and I'm going to talk to you today about some enhancements that my group is working on. We've received feedback from group administrators on GitLab.com that they need more visibility into actions that users of their group are taking and additional ways to ensure that their intellectual property is secure. So we had a first iteration to solve this problem through group managed accounts. So what group managed accounts were is a way to require a dedicated account to interact with a group. And because these accounts would only work in the scope of a single group, this would allow us to give administrators more visibility and more control over those accounts. So we completed a beta for this feature and we talked to users about it and we received some interesting feedback. Group administrators from companies that had open source components to it actually thought these accounts were restrictive if they only worked within a single group. Because what this meant is that they now needed to keep track of multiple accounts that people were using to complete their complete day-to-day work if there were open source components to it. We also got feedback from developers that this model was restrictive because they now needed to have separate accounts for work and personal and open source projects that they may be working on GitLab. And interestingly enough, they told us that this is not the experience they had in our competitors, and they wanted something similar to that in GitLab, where they only had one account and they could have work and personal work and open source work all together. So we took this feedback in and really started to begin to understand which parts of the experience administrator needed more control over and how we can solve for those things specifically so that we can keep one account for all work in GitLab. And there were really three big themes. The first one was additional ways to protect intellectual property, right? So how can we keep everything under the group, within the group, right? And ways to ensure that. So one feature that we completed recently was a setting at the group level that basically allows you to prevent forking outside of the group. And what that really does is that it keeps all your code within your group where an administrator can have full visibility and control over it. The other part that we heard was around the creation of projects. So we're going to do a couple of things around that to basically encourage people that belong to groups that are organizations to create considering projects there first, right? So the first one is defaulting to that group if you're under an SSO session for that group, and also having additional error checking and really changing the experience or our project creation to fully make people understand the implications of creating a project within a group or your personal namespace or somewhere else. The other message that we heard was around being able to control more of a user's data and their profile. So for security and compliance reasons, a lot of times organizations need to be able to control the email and first name and last name that someone uses when they interact with their group, and that's not something that they can do today. So that's where a concept comes in that we're developing called personas, which basically will allow us to segment out parts of a user account and allow administrators to control those parts. So what we're going to be able to do is have, and think of it like profiles, a profile for work, right, where your email and first name, last name is basically synced from an external system, or your administrator can change it, right? And that way, you know, your work profile can be controlled by your work. And if you want to have a different display name, different email, different even authentication method for your personal work, you can do that. So I'll include a link to the Personas epic in this video so you can take a look. The other part that administrators really need more visibility and control over is just all ways of accessing their group, right? So today, administrators don't really have a way to see which API keys and which SSH keys are accessing their group, right? And the reason for that is that when a user creates these credentials, they're scoped for an entire instance, not just for a single group. So there's not really a clean way to give administrators ownership and visibility into them. So to solve for that, we're gonna work on a concept of group scope credentials, right? So group scope access tokens. So access tokens that only work for a specific group, and SSH keys that are designated to a specific group. So what that will allow us to do is that since those credentials only work within the scope of that group, administrators now can see them, they can revoke them. Basically, they can require expiration dates. They can build all sorts of business rules around them. So as you can see, we're building what I'll describe as a menu of options for administrators to enable that will really give them more flexibility around what they ensure and how they do it. So it's more flexible than having dedicated accounts, and in the end, it'll give them the same end results of more confidence around, like I said, their intellectual property being secured, being able to control settings, and having visibility into who's accessing their group. So thank you for listening. If you have any feedback or additional use cases I should consider, please submit an issue or leave a comment in the issues that I've included in this description. Thanks again.